All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite Warlock here, practicing necromancer and overall occult dark practitioner of the arts. And today I want to take the Warlock series into a more applicable, I guess you can call it, path working. In the past, I've discussed Thanatology, I've discussed um, doorways, and I've discussed gateways and within the mystical and magical internship, if, I guess you can call it, within the fashion of communing with the gods. But today, I want to take it into a more physical application for you, for those of you who are looking to get into necromancy or any tradition that deals with death. Okay, like say shamanism, maybe. I know a lot of people tend to go towards shamanism, herbalism, practices such as Wiccan and pagan, but very few actually submit themselves to the more darker crafts like Satanism, demonolatry, and that of necromancy. So today's topics are going to be necrology, anthropology, and thanatology. So why don't we begin? Thanatology is the study of death and dying. Some of the practices you probably already heard of, like the Green Emerald, perhaps the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or that of, say, the Ars Bardo, the Art of Dying, or better yet, today it's known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Okay? So, with that said, what is Thanatology? Thanatology is the practice of understanding the mind's process. For an example, when we think of speech, somebody has a stroke, okay? The most likely the part of the brain that is affected, and this is referred to as the motor sections of the brain, is things like sections 44 and 45, which is known as the Baraka, the Boca or Baraka area of the mind, and this is known as the vocal point, where you use your voice box, you use your voice and stuff like that. But you've got other sections of the brain that get affected, and what happens when you have seizures, a stroke or whatever, it's a part of your brain that is shutting down. Okay. Think of the elderly when they get into, say, oh, I don't know, let's go with Alzheimer's or that of Parkinson's. Basically, what this is for the individual going through this is it's a slow, painful death. Okay. Basically, it's parts of the brain dying. Hey, Apprentice Necromancer, Hades, Black Flame. Welcome, brother. So, the study of thanatology is basically almost like being a counselor. It's like being a psychiatrist because you're not just a more common CNA or hospice worker. You're also a psychologist, you're a counselor, you're a grief specialist, and you help people with the fact that they're going to die. Okay. Maybe answering, helping them, guiding them to that solution of, hey, I'm going to die, but what goes next? What do I do between now and that final kickoff, so to speak, from the physical realm? Maybe do a DNR, a do not resuscitate order, or perhaps, say, for an example, a living will, whatever. You know what I'm saying? A thanatologist basically counsels the dying, counsels the families, and counsels the communities if that person has left a huge impact on that particular gender, that particular, how should I say this? Let's call it with generation. Okay. Back in the 90s, it was the hip hop phase. So you probably go with, like, say, Christina Aguilera, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, or Mandy Moore, Jessica Alba, Jessica Simpson, or whatever. Maybe even 98 Degrees. It was that whole group band era. Whereas back in the 80s, it was things like Black Sabbath, AC/DC, Styx, REO Speedwagon, you know, bands such as that. And today, you kind of got that crossover between country and hip hop, um, crossovers that artists are doing. And so, I mean, it comes down to the actual mark that these people have left on their communities and what's going to happen after that fact. So a thanatologist is somebody that actually takes care of that, much like public relations. All right. But it's more than that. A thanatologist spends most of their time studying death. As a necromancer, you basically try to understand the art of dying. So naturally, you'd probably get into the notary portion of obituaries. Okay. In this case, the notary, anybody could become a notarizer. It could be somebody that finalizes it, like a physician, a mortician, you know, uh, ER doctor trying to resuscitate somebody. They tend to call the final death, so to speak. Then they get kicked off to the mortuary where a mortician would find out the cause of death through an autopsy. Okay, this is modern day stuff. Okay, you have the funeral home directors, you have the grave diggers, you have the coroners, that transport corpses and cadavers here and there. Okay, you got the driver of the hearse. All of these things that play into a huge part. But as a thanatologist, you are studying all of this stuff. So you're trying to understand death. You're trying to understand the root cause of why people die. Why do some kick off silently in the night during slumber, whereas others would die in a very atrocious and painful manner? Okay. And a lot of times when we see this, they don't really cover this in the medical, courses that they supply in colleges today. Personally, when I was applying for thanatology for colleges recently, I found out that even in the medical field, not just in the colleges, these doctors, these so-called teachers, have never even heard of thanatology. Okay. And that's a shock because it's been very much active since the 70s within the medical field. Okay. So when we get into this, then we can go into necrology, which is basically, like I said, the noting of death. You got the necrophage, or that of the various different necros, like things that people really don't want to discuss in the modern era, because a lot of times you'll find it too grotesque, too, how should I say, oh, I don't want to go near this. I don't want to hear this. This shit goes on. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to deal with it. I want to look the other cheek because it's all watered down. You've become The world has become too, how should I say this, watered down and protected, pampered even. Which is why I do this series, because I'm going to tell it to you the way it is. You don't like it? Who gives a shit? That's on you. But here it is. A few years ago, I got into Thanatology. I got into necrology and sociology. Sociology is the study of human behavior. It is and this is the portion that really goes into anthropology. It really goes into anthropology, and I'll get into that in just a moment. It's very interesting because of the fact that when you look at the human associations, even animal associations, they have distinct behavior, distinct personality traits. Like you would see soldiers who went through boot camp together and served together still hang out well into their golden years, or what is classified as the golden years, meaning senior citizens. I don't know why they call it the golden years. It's like that's the end of your life. You're just basically kicking back, waiting to die. Basically, at that point. Personally, I'd rather go down in a hail of bullets, but like Bonnie and Clyde, you know. But here's the kicker: when you look at human behavior and you look at the mind, the mind plays a huge part in thanatology, not just in sociology. Your behaviors, your outlooks on things, the socialism of the segregation of different topics, different career choices, different types of people, where some go into criminal activity and others would rather sit back and study history, archaeology type stuff. And others would like to get into witchcraft and sorcery and supernatural applications of, say, spiritualism. Okay, you got all these types of people that fit underneath sociology, and this is just touching the how should I say, the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, of just that. Now, this, after 3 years, 2 3 years, has led me into studying anthropology. Anthropology, okay, and I discovered that anthropology has four distinct, how should I say this, categorizations. And there's social cultural anthropology, you have biological or biology anthropology, you have archaeology anthropology, and then you have linguistic anthropology. And these practices go into everything much like thanatology within, say, the medical field, go into crime scene investigations. Okay, it all plays into a huge category of different career choices. Not just being an active necromancer or an active spiritualist of any kind. It doesn't matter if you're a demonologist who performs rituals in a cemetery or in an abandoned building. You may be a ghost hunter and like chasing down the so-called haunted locations. You could be somebody who gets into the medical field and wants to make a career out of it. And there's actually a couple that was marked down by a journalist who was a neo-pagan out of London, and one that's, from what I understand, has been the chief of the psychiatric department down in Massachusetts. I think it was Worcester or Worcester, Massachusetts area down by Boston. And these two individuals were mentioned by Hans Holzer in his book Witches. Found that very, very interesting. And you go into Nicholas Remy's book of Demonolatry, and you have a wide range of topics that play into spiritualism. Okay, not just going into like to what was found on these witches when they were being persecuted and slaughtered like livestock in a butcher's, you know farm. But anthropology, when I got into it, it was something that really caught my attention and my fascination. Okay, and this is why. There was a there was an application. It was a show that I found on YouTube, and this is where I first came across the true applications of what the medical, and not just the medical field or college field of being a professor and a specialist. but also that of the police force actually used. Back during the Satanic Panic, everything that moved, a crime that was committed, a Satanist supposedly did it. Okay? The FBI must have investigated hundreds, if not thousands, of so called satanic um, crimes. Okay? Before they put together, much like the church did on the classification of witchcraft, of what determines an occult crime. Okay? Now, the name of the series that I found on YouTube was called the Skeleton Files or the Skeleton Series. And it didn't just go along with occult crimes. It did average, acts of passion to things like, just regular serial killers. It had so many different applications, for 48 to 49-minute videos that were very fascinating and intellectual, well put together. So I started doing my research into anthropology, and I started delving into what it is, the classification, the historical sense, and found out that a lot of these anthropologists, if you could choose any bone in the human body or animal body that they would rather receive, it would 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the skull. Okay? 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the skull. And this is because it has the brain matter attached to it. It has your teeth. Okay? And when you have wisdom teeth, not all the time do they pop out through the skin in the back of your mouth. Okay? This is why you have your wisdom teeth extracted. Now, in your teeth, the main source of DNA would be in your pulp. Okay? But most so, if you go to the base of your skull where it's the thickest, they can drill right into your skull and gain the um, the necessary material to determine who you are. And it goes well beyond this. Okay, I'm talking, finding your ethnic backgrounds. I mean, if you're just bleached bones, for an example, like say somebody just bleached the hell out of your bones after they slaughtered you, guess what? These people, this particular field doesn't just measure the size of your skull, okay, to determine if you're male or female, but they can extract your own DNA and find out who you were, okay? And the color of your skin, the color of your skull determines if you have recently passed away, if the item was purchased legally, for an example, like say from one of these numerous companies that sell bones, human and animal bones alike, legally for like anywhere from 500 to 5 grand and above. Okay. You've probably gone to the doctor's office and see the skeletons hanging from um, one of those poles, like a coat rack type thing. Guess what? That was a human being that was bleached and cleansed of all the bacteria and harmful things of the human body. Okay, and then it was laced with a coat of wax, basically to sustain it. All right. So, anyways, from this point, they can even determine if you've been buried, how long you've been dead. Very, very fascinating. And they do this from the cheekbones, the teeth, your eye sockets, even the bone structure and the size of it. Very, very fascinating. So even if you look at, say, for example, I don't know how many of you have ever had a broken bone. I know I have. I've had a few of them, okay, over the years. Now, when you break your bones, like say you jump off a cliff, or, a small cliff, or you fall off a ladder and break your arm, the way the condition of the bone breaks, okay, it's wet and moist. This means you were alive when that break occurred. But if it's dry and brittle, it means you've been dead for a while. Okay. And what's interesting is all of this stuff is mostly based off two aspects: biological anthropology and sociocultural anthropology. Very, very impressive stuff. And when you get into occultism, you can get into the hip joints and sockets. You can get into the spinal pieces, the pieces of your spine, because it's like over 2 dozen aspects that make up your spine that is connected and fused together so that it helps you walk and move. Your skull, even your vertebrae, plays a huge part in this, and it's very amazing. And what's also interesting is, much like the Catholic Church did when they classified and broke down witchcraft within four statures. You have witchcraft, necromancy, divination, and possession. Okay, that make up witchcraft, and at least that's according to the JCI, the Catholic Church, the Vatican. The anthropology and criminal lab, basically the law enforcement, have four distinct classifications of death. You have the murder or homicide, you have the suicide, and then you have the natural death, and finally, what they refer to as commonly the accidental death, meaning you fall off a ladder, break your neck, oops, off to Nether Neverland. But that's considered to be an accident type motive, okay, for death. Now, it's interesting to note because of the fact that just how much your bones reveal. And some of the things that it reveals is, like I said, if when you died, how long you've been dead, your ethnic, your origins, where does your family lineage, hail from? If you probably heard of, what's that? What the hell's the name of that place there? It's out in California. They test your DNA and can tell your heritage. Very, very cool. And but what's interesting is when you get into occult, say Haitian Voodoo or Palo Mayumbi, you get into Satanism or demonolatry, you're probably going to carry on you bones, especially if you're a practitioner of the arcane, such as hexcraft, cursing, jinxing, hexing. If you're working with powders or you're working with oleums, you're probably going to be grinding down bones, both animal and human alike. But at the same time, what do you think happens at a mortuary? Okay, when they cremate you, a crematorium, they're basically frying your ass into a powder. That's basically all it is. So somebody could take that powder, put it in an urn. You have an occult urn right there, an object of death, much like a spirit box or a prenda. The prenda is also known as a naganga. Okay, so you probably have a skull, either a ceramic or you have a recreational aspect. Maybe if you're lucky, you have the money to purchase a real one, a human skull. Okay. And this sits on your altar. You see, an anthropologist can tell just by looking at it how you died. Was there scratches, indents, maybe nicks, like somebody took let's go with a screwdriver to try to fillet the skin off and the flesh off your skull, or um, did you get impaled by, say, oh, I don't know, a spear? Okay, how old your wounds are, how if it pierced your bones and it chipped your bone, they could tell how long it's been there. They could tell just about anything these days just by this particular path working alone. And if you're working, like I said, with curses and hexes, you're probably going to be looking at nail clippings, teeth, hair, bone dust, vertebrae, hip joints, and skulls, both human and animal alike. So there's a lot that you can do. legally and illegally, and, and it's kind of cool to see because you see how far humanity has come, especially within the legal system. Whereas, say in some countries, like say, let's go with Malawi, they have a specific task force that investigates occult crimes. You got those here, but they're normally associated with like the FBI or a special division of a local police force. And there's even been legal cases where an occult crime has taken effect, and you see where a specific private group, like say down in Florida, you have ARM. This is the Animal Recovery. What do they call that? The Animal Recovery Movement. Okay, that go around and investigate, and then I mean, they have the gloves on. They're just regular tack gloves, and they'll undo everything from a Ngunga or a cauldron, and they'll handle everything. They'll take photos of everything, then they'll put it all back, and then they'll call the cops and go, "Hey, we came across this item. You may want to come out because it's got human bones in it. It's got animal bones in it." And this is what these groups do because it's all about attention seeking. It's the animal recovery. These animals are so hostile. They're not, you know, taken care of. It's a brutal act against them. Their antlers were cut off. Oh my God, there was a human skull in there. Oh my word, we got to call the law enforcement. Wow. Okay. So anyways, this is basically like those. I'm not hating on women or anything, but you got the man haters in the workplace. Well, guess what? It's all drama. Okay, you can to a point where you can't tell a joke without somebody getting a hair across their ass. This is basically what this is. Okay, church and state is separate, and if you look at the First Amendment and what makes up a uh, a protected religion, Palo Mayumbe is considered a protected religion. Voodoo is considered a protected religion. Satanism is considered to be a protected religion. Witchcraft, not Wicca not Wicca, but witchcraft is considered a protected religion. And if you have a foundation, you have a following, like say a coven or a congregation of some sort, you have a doctrine, like say a grimoire, you fall underneath a protected religion. Okay, and therefore, when you go underneath religious land use and personalized religious acts, no one it says under very clearly under equal rights to debit down in A, B, C, and D. No individual has the right to limit or deny another. This includes sect, assembly, individual, or organization. Okay. So basically, arm is violating a religious sanctity, a sanctum where Pato Mayumbi is known to be practiced in between this farmland. It is a specific setting where they perform their rites and rituals. Okay, they don't go into saying, okay, this was legally bought. They don't go in to say, okay, this was illegally dug up or stolen from, say, a mausoleum or a mortuary or wherever. No, they don't do that. They just go in, take photos. Oh my God, I came across this. Well, how's that not illegal? Is that not is inciting a riot or a panic not still a crime these days? You know what I'm saying? So, and then it doesn't help that the JCI get involved either. So, or in this case, the Satan Temple, who's constantly going around suing over this and that. The latest stuff is all about abortions. Freaking insanity there. But then we can get into secret societies, things like the Masons or the Masonic Lodge. You get into the Golden Dawn. You get into the Skull and Crossbones, and where these items are held in high esteem because they're practiced there. They're utilized as a symbolatry. Okay, you consider many traditions utilize the skull, the image of a skull, just out of example here. And there was an actual, I want to say it was down in Jersey. There was a case about 15, 20 years ago. A lady from Cuba who practiced Santa, Palo Mayumbi and Santeria type practices. She spent a long time going from Botanica to Botanica, and it was interesting because one of her clients actually turned her into the FBI, basically. And the FBI went in. They found this altar, this sanctum, you know, and they took photos. They took both the Gungas and they sent it to an anthropologist. And this anthropologist discovered that there were four distinct individuals, one child, and the rest were adults, both male and female. And what was ironic is these bones were stolen from graveyards. And they she this they didn't just tell the ethnic background or the if they were male, child, or female, but they went into the age. They went into how long the person has been dead. What did they die of, even? Where they were buried. And in some cases, you're able to tell from a family member or a potential family member if they were related. But these secret societies, like I said, they do exist. More so, some of them, if you follow, say, for example, the Masons, they had a brutal past. They controlled businesses and corporations. These were wealthy men who owned large chunks of power throughout the old world. Even when they came to the new world, they settled in. And it's got a cat fight by the door. But anyways, it's amazing to see how they would take their oath in front of a skull and crossbones. Like you got some of the U.S. presidents that were known to be associates of this. Even from what I understand, Clint Eastwood was one of them. I found a video right here on YouTube. I can't classify if it was true or not, but it he claimed to be of Skull and Bones organization. Well, if he was, just imagine the oath that you had to take in that society, that secret society. The Masonics would utilize a sword in the skulls. They would utilize the ceremonial magics that are associated there. And in some cases, depending on the crime, would eliminate that betrayer, that oath breaker, the one that did wrong. They would either shun them, abandon them, or just plain eliminate them by driving the sword through their chest. They consider it the most honorable way to go. And it's interesting to see how much secret societies have played a huge part within occultism, within the black arts. I mean, look at Eliphas Levi. He was associated one in his early days. Before he got into necromantic practices, was scared shitless, and then ran back to the Hermetics like a little bitch, so to speak. You know, to quote Godsmack, crying like a bitch, because that's basically what he did. He went to London. He got associated with this group of black magicians, these sorcerers and sorcerers. This lady, he met this lady that had a black veil over her face, handed him the ingredient, the items that he would need for this particular rite. He spent 2 to 3 days in this rite, only to have a frightening encounter with an apparition that made his entire arm go numb for 3 days, and after which he went back home, studied the Kabbalah, studied Hermeneutics, never to step foot back into black magic again. You see, this goes to show you that it's not just your practices that you can do. It also shows you the job descriptions of duties that you can carry out as a practitioner. I mean, very few law enforcement, like say DAs or law enforcement agents, would actually sit down and read a book on, say, demonolatry. How about occultism? How about angelic sorceries of evocation? Okay? I'm just saying, how many legalized practitioners do you see out there today? You go underneath YouTube and you type in Thanatology, you'll find very few people who became Thanatologists. And if you become a Thanatologist, you can get a job anywhere from running a nursing home to working in a mortuary or a funeral home. You become an anthropologist, you can work at colleges, okay? You can work in a crime lab. You can become part of the government because it's scientific. It's based off science and facts, based off numbers, but it deals with the same categories as these other two. You're not only being a notarizer of death, but notifying somebody that, oh, your kin has died. I mean, 500 years ago, it was the church's duty to notarize people. Now it's the law enforcement agencies. Uh, by the way, your child died in a car accident. Or um, we're here to notify you that so and so has passed away. Wow, that's notary. And all you need to do to become a notarizer is become has spent many years, a few years being an upright citizen, a businessman or woman, just to become a notarizer of death. That's all you got to do. Interesting, isn't it? And yet, the study of death is one of the biggest things out there today within the medical field, which goes all the way back to the 16th century. 16th century. Now you go back even further and you get into things like assassination, the Hasheshin, the Knights of Templar, or even go back to the Roman Empire or the Turks. You get into the Huns, the hordes. Go back into Asian communities of feudal Japan. You're going to see the art of death. How did they mix their poisons? I mean, you consider the Bushido, the way of the samurai, goes all the way back to the 14th century. And that's just what I know about. Okay? The 14th century. By the 15th century, you had ninjutsu in place, which was a part of Bushido. These were silent assassins. They used darts, they used daggers, they used poisons and powders, the art of assassination. They took it to a whole new level. The Hasheshin, which which literally was a secret order of holy monks, but also monks that were highly trained in combat, much like the Knights of Templar, used a dagger. They withstood armies for 200 years. More than that, actually. They go all the way back to the 6th century in one form or another. but they were wiped out in the 12th century by the Huns, by the Khans of the hordes. Ironic. So many dukes, so many counts. They were credited with over 300 confirmed kills. And each time they went to war with these different sects of the Islamic states, they always came out with an agreement at the end. It was always respect. But then this new group came in and swept the land, wiped them out. The Mongols wiped them out. Or what we know today as the Mongols. Just like they did with the dark and black shamans. History is amazing. And anthropology, anthropology can get into all of this stuff. And just what I've talked about here is the tip of the iceberg of this practice. Or I should say practices. So they don't just deal with the culture, they don't deal with just the family or the individual dying. They literally are studying death. Death. How to kill. How to heal. How to bring somebody back from the dead. Rejuvenation factor. And today, you have to have a legalized license to even practice anything. In the past, it was the witches and warlocks that did all this stuff. It was the church that did all this stuff. It wasn't until the 16th, 17th century that everything started going towards licenses, what's legal and what's illegal, what's good and what's evil. Study of the human being, the human animal is just that. It's anthropology, it's thanatology. It's a study of death and dying. It's the how can we postpone it? How can we learn about it? The Egyptian Book of the Dead should have taught you a lot. The Tibetan Book of the Dead should have taught you a lot. But people forget about past orthodoxies. They tend to believe what they are led to believe. They believe what they want to believe. They believe the lies and the bullshit, not facts. When you get a lot of this stuff together, it becomes a pattern. It becomes a pattern. A man who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You get into the African Caribbean traditions, and you will see where animal sacrifices, these animals are perhaps put up like kings. They're better treated than your own family members, right up until their throats are slit. Their heads are chopped off. The blood is placed over the nganga, the prenda, or that of the altar. It's there. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the the Gaelic Druids, they all did human and animal sacrificing. But you'll have people today go, "Oh, we don't do that stuff anymore." Hmm, really? You do know about religious practices, right? Not surprised for getting into a more modern aged practice like Wicca and paganism. Just saying, you're gonna believe what you want to believe, and it's interesting to see the actual practices by the Aztecs, the Mayans, and these Druids. If you live by New Hampshire, why don't you go see Salem? You know the Stonehenge there in Salem, New Hampshire. If you live over in England, see the altar over there. You know the Stonehenge there. Very, very amazing how these rites took place. If you're down in Central and South America, why don't you check out the pyramids down there, like in Brazil? How about the old cities of the Aztecs between North America, Central America, and South America? Very, very fascinating. The ritualized rites of how they removed the organs from the beating chest of somebody that was living to offer a fresh human heart to their gods. How about draining the blood out of the victim, out of the sacrifice, with a priest standing under with a bucket to catch it? How about the cult of Isis, Hecate, Artemis, or even Anubis? How about the Shem priesthood out of Giza? How about their practices during the first, second, and third dynasty of Egypt? Again, people don't know this because they don't teach this stuff in schools. They don't teach it. This is why it's so important and why I stress to you to do your own research. You want to learn, the best way to do it is hands on. Whatever you preach, always back it up with numerous facts and always make yourself available to the public because what you say and do, you answer to the public, not to yourself and not to the gods. You answer to the gods, but you answer to the people. And when you do things here in the world, you answer to the people. If you're speaking for the gods because they guide you to speak on something or they guide you to do something, then you answer to them if you don't do what they ask. It's just a fact. You are the ambassador. You are the one that walks between the land of the dead and the realm of the living. No one else. So my point is this. Do your own homework because it's the only way you're going to learn. Make the time. If it's important to you, make the time. I understand everybody's got a hectic life like me. I have a full-time, I have a job that I love. I work in a funeral home. I'm a dietary aide. Love it. I have a family, raising a 4-year-old who's going to be a 5 years old this coming fall. Love it. But you know what? Even my better half, who I also spoil like rotten, literally rotten. She looked at me yesterday after getting her new car and said, "Why are you spoiling me so much? It's my job. It's things that matter. I want them to be happy." Okay? So if it's important to you, like your studies, your practices, then guess what? You're going to make time for it. And if you're lucky, you may even find a career that goes hand in hand with your religious practice. It's ironic. Very few find that. Very few have the gall to actually go forth and do it. But that's up to you. The ball's in your court. All I can do is show you the path. All I can do is show you that door. You have to decide if you want to walk through it or not. That's on you. But I'm also not going to tell you what to believe and what not to believe because I want you to do your own homework. I want you to take what I've shown here with the sources that I've discussed, and I want you to go into your own research, take it from there, and see what else you can find out. It's a small little fraction of what I've studied. The rest is up to you. Abysmal Void, welcome to the page, the channel. And I'm not sure who you are that just popped in with a little white skull, but that's a language I don't speak. But anyways, welcome to the channel, nonetheless. So, anyways, go out, do your own research. Hit Google, hit the library, hit the books. You know, hell, Google is a great source of information. There's so much out there. See, I'm lucky enough that my better half is a CNA. She has all kinds of medical books. My mother was in the medical field, and she typed a lot. So she did medical transcription, and so I got my hands on many different types of sources, ranging over 3 generations, 4 generations even. So that's something that is awesome. And if you're lucky enough to do that, you're going to learn a lot from the medical field, but then you're going to get into religion, you're going to get into the practices, and you're going to start learning that as well. Go into folklore, go into mythology, go into the world history, and just expand your horizons. And I guarantee it, the next time you go into the ritual room, you're going to have a whole new appreciation for what is in there. All right. Have a good day. And until next time, education's the key.